It's the morning of June 18th, 2020. In Munich, Jan Marsalek wakes up in his villa, a magnificently restored property directly opposite the Russian consulate, and puts on one of his tailor-made Brioni suits. He is 40 years old. He is one of the most powerful fintech executives in Europe. He is the chief operating officer of Wirecard, Germany's most celebrated technology company, valued at $30 billion. He is also, by this point, one of the most wanted men in the world. He just doesn't look like it. That evening, Marsalek sits down for dinner at an Italian restaurant in Munich with a trusted contact. They eat, they talk quietly, they make a plan. The next morning, he drives to a small airfield outside Vienna and boards a private jet. He pays the pilots $8,000 in cash. He has arranged for sources in the Philippines to falsely tell investigators his plane landed there. It didn't. He flies through Minsk and lands in Moscow. And Jan Marsalek, the school dropout who had talked his way to the top of a $30 billion company, the man who once showed colleagues the classified formula for a Russian nerve agent over drinks, the man who German investigators would later confirm had been a Russian spy for nearly a decade, simply disappears. He is still there today, free. To understand Jan Marsalek, you need to understand that he was never supposed to be where he was. He was born in Vienna in 1980 into a family with Czech roots. His grandfather, Hans Marlek, had been a member of the Austrian resistance during World War II and was later suspected of spying for the Soviet Union. Jan dropped out of a prestigious French private school without a single qualification. No degree, no diploma, no formal training of any kind. At 19, he briefly founded his own e-commerce software company. It went nowhere. But it taught him something more valuable than any business school could: how to talk about technology in a way that made people feel like they were in the presence of someone who understood the future. In 2000, on his 20th birthday, he walked into Wirecard, then a small startup processing payments for online gambling and adult entertainment sites, and got himself hired. Within 10 years, he was COO. His personal assistant, Sabine Heinzinger, worked directly for him for 7 years. When German lawmakers later asked her what she knew about Jan Marsalek, the person, his background, his contacts, his private life, she had a single answer: I don't know anything about him. He has always separated work from private life. 7 years. And she knew nothing. That was not an accident. Here is what Jan Marsalek looked like to the people around him. Charming, magnetic, impossibly energetic. The kind of man who made everyone feel like the most important person in the room. For you, always, he used to tell subordinates who asked for a minute of his time. And he meant it, or he appeared to. Charisma, said almost every former Wirecard employee when asked what defined him. Even as a 20-year-old, he exuded self-confidence and intelligence. He wore Brioni suits and travelled exclusively by private jet. He once dispatched his assistant to London on a chartered flight to buy cough syrup. He kept IV drip equipment and a hospital bed at his Munich villa for when his schedule became too demanding to stop. He was, to everyone who worked with him, a genius. And here is what Jan Marsalek looked like underneath. He had 8 passports. His magnificently restored villa sat directly across from the Russian consulate. His office in Vienna was next door to the Russian embassy. He flew to the ruins of Palmyra, Syria, at the personal invitation of the Russian military days after it was retaken from ISIS, and bragged about it to colleagues over dinner. In 2018, he sat down with traders in London and pulled out a set of classified documents. Inside them was the full chemical formula for Novichok, the Russian nerve agent used to poison former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in Salisbury that same year. Documents obtained from an Austrian intelligence official, shown casually in a business meeting to impress people. He was running a private mercenary operation in Libya, attempting to build a 15,000-strong armed force to control migration routes at gunpoint. He had been a registered asset of Russian military intelligence, the GRU, since at least 2014. All of this was happening simultaneously, while he ran board meetings in Munich. while he approved quarterly reports, while he told every colleague who needed a minute of his time, "For you, always." But none of the spy work would have been possible without the fraud, because Wirecard was not just a cover story, it was an intelligence asset. As COO, Marsalek controlled the company's global payment processing network, which meant Wirecard had visibility into the financial transactions of millions of people across dozens of countries. It processed payments for businesses, hotels, airlines. It knew when people traveled, what they bought, how they moved money. Investigators later confirmed he used Wirecard's payment data to track journalists and short sellers people who were trying to expose the fraud. When a photo of Bellingcat's lead Russia investigator surfaced in his messages to a spy contact, Marsalek replied simply, "I'm very familiar with them. Wirecard was processing a large part of their payments, and we had access to their flight booking data. He was using a $30 billion financial company as a surveillance tool." The fraud itself was almost secondary. Marsalek had constructed a parallel business reality through a network of offshore third-party partners across Asia, Dubai, and island entities that existed primarily on paper, generating hundreds of millions in claimed revenue that never actually existed. The crown jewel was $1.9 billion supposedly sitting in trust accounts at 2 banks in the Philippines. The money didn't exist. The banks, when finally contacted directly in June 2020, confirmed they had never held accounts for Wirecard at all. A quarter of the company's entire balance sheet had been invented. There was one person who had been trying to say this for years. Dan McCrum was a Financial Times journalist who first received a tip about Wirecard in 2015. He spent the next 5 years investigating, publishing, and being systematically destroyed for it. Wirecard hired private investigators to surveil him. Hackers for hire in India were contracted to infiltrate effed journalists' communications. There were credible warnings of documents poisoned with nerve agents sent to reporters. An alleged $10 million bribe offer was made to effed editors to kill the coverage. And Germany's own financial regulator, BaFin, the institution specifically designed to protect investors from exactly this kind of fraud, responded by launching a criminal investigation. Not into Wirecard, into McCrum. BaFin investigated the journalist. It banned short selling of Wirecard stock. It filed complaints against the people telling the truth and protected the company fabricating it. For 5 years, the German establishment chose the story it wanted to be true over the story that was actually true. And while it did, Marsalek kept processing payments, kept attending board meetings, kept running his spy network, kept building his mercenary operation. In June 2020, Ernst & Young, which had signed off on Wirecard's accounts for a decade without finding a single fabricated transaction, finally demanded direct confirmation from the Philippine banks. Both banks said the same thing. They had no relationship with Wirecard. The accounts did not exist. On June 18th, 2020, Wirecard's share price fell 70% in a single day. On June 19th, CEO Markus Braun resigned, suggesting Wirecard itself had been the victim of sophisticated fraud by rogue employees. 3 days later, he turned himself in to Munich prosecutors and was arrested. Jan Marsalek watched all of this from across the table at an Italian restaurant in Munich. And then he drove to an airfield and paid 2 pilots $8,000 to fly him out of Europe. His decoy, a fake trail to the Philippines, bought him the hours he needed. By the time German investigators understood what had happened, he was already in Moscow. Wirecard filed for insolvency on June 25th, 2020. 1.9 billion confirmed missing. 3.2 billion owed to creditors. Thousands of jobs gone. Investors who had trusted Germany's financial establishment lost everything. Markus Braun has been in custody since his arrest. His trial in Munich is ongoing. He denies orchestrating the fraud and claims he was deceived. The heads of BaFin resigned. Germany's financial regulator was restructured. Ernst & Young faced inquiries across multiple countries for signing off on fabricated accounts for a decade. Dan McCrum won the Gerald Loeb Award, the highest honour in financial journalism. And Jan Marsalek Investigators tracked his phone to the vicinity of FSB headquarters in Moscow hundreds of times between January and November 2024. He has been photographed strolling through Trubnaya Square in a white t-shirt, sunglasses dangling from his collar, his girlfriend's hand in his. He has travelled to Crimea. He moves through the city freely under the name Alexander Neladov. Interpol has issued a red notice for his arrest. The 1.9 billion has never been recovered. Jan Marsalek joined Wirecard on his 20th birthday with no degree, no qualifications and no experience. 20 years later, he walked out of Europe with 8 passports, a new identity and the protection of Russian intelligence. In between, he ran a $30 billion fraud, operated a spy network inside one of Germany's most celebrated companies, used its payment data to track the journalists investigating him, and built a mercenary operation designed to reshape migration across North Africa. All while telling every colleague who needed a minute of his time for you always, the German government wanted a tech champion so badly that it investigated the journalist telling the truth and protected the company telling the lie. And the man at the centre of it all is riding an e-scooter through the shopping streets of Moscow. He is 45 years old. He is free. And nobody is coming for him.